Daniel Harper stood in the briefing room of the Morning Star, trying to understand how he had ended up here. 3 days ago, he was a simple communications officer doing routine translation work. Now, he was part of humanity's first diplomatic, meeting with an alien species called the Zaithrine, the original officer for this job. Lieutenant Peters had fallen sick with some kind of stomach bug. Commander Lisa Grant had looked through the crew roster and picked Daniel as the replacement. He knew 4 languages and had good marks in his cultural training courses. That was enough to get him this assignment. "Stay quiet unless spoken to," Commander Grant told him before they boarded the shuttle to Crossroads 7. "Watch everything. Take notes. The Zaithrine are very formal, very strict about their rules. We need to make a good impression." Daniel nodded. He had read the files on the Zaithrine during the trip to the neutral station. They were an old species, much older than humanity. They had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans were still living in caves. Their technology was advanced beyond anything Earth could produce. Their society ran on strict rules about who was important and who was not. The station called Crossroads 7 was massive. It hung in empty space between human territory and Zaithrine space, built by a third species that no longer existed. Now it served as a meeting place for different civilizations to talk without fighting. When Daniel stepped off the shuttle, the first thing he noticed was how cold the station felt. The metal walls were dark gray and covered with lights that blinked in patterns he did not understand. Aliens of different shapes and sizes moved through the corridors. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others floated or crawled or moved in ways that hurt to look at. Commander Grant led their team of 6 humans through the station to a large meeting room. Inside, the Zaithrine were already waiting. Daniel had seen pictures of the Zaithrine in the files, but seeing them in person was different. They stood about the same height as humans, maybe a bit taller. Their skin was smooth and pale, almost white, but covered with glowing patterns that moved and changed colors. The patterns looked like someone had painted flowing lines across their bodies with light. They had 2 arms and 2 legs like humans, but their fingers were longer and their joints bent in ways that seemed wrong. Their faces were narrow with large eyes that looked like colored glass. No nose, just 2 small slits. Their mouths were small and their voices came out soft and musical. There were 5 Zaithrine in the room. The one in the center was clearly the leader. Her patterns glowed brighter than the others, shifting between blue and silver. She wore a long robe made of material that seemed to be alive, moving slightly even though there was no wind. Commander Grant stepped forward and bowed slightly, the way the cultural files had instructed. "I am Commander Lisa Grant of Earth. We thank you for agreeing to this meeting." The Zaithrine leader bowed back, her movement perfectly smooth. "I am Valshara, speaker for the Zaithrine Council. We welcome humanity to this place of peace." The formal introductions continued. Each human was presented. Each Zaithrine stated their name and title. Daniel barely listened because he noticed something strange. Valshara kept looking at him. Not just a quick glance. She turned her large crystalline eyes toward him and stared. Her gaze held on him for several long seconds before she looked away to continue the formal greeting. Then, a minute later, she looked at him again. Daniel tried to ignore it. Maybe she was just curious about humans. Maybe all the Zaithrine were staring and he only noticed her because she was the leader. But when he glanced at the other Zaithrine, they were looking at Commander Grant or at their own devices. Only Valshara kept staring at him. The meeting began in earnest. Commander Grant sat at the large table and Daniel took his place standing behind her with the other junior officers. The Zaithrine sat across from them, their glowing patterns casting strange shadows on the walls. Valshara spoke about trade routes and technology exchange. She talked about mapping systems and resource sharing. Her words were formal and careful, chosen to reveal little while sounding generous. Commander Grant responded with equal care, offering possibilities without making promises. Through it all, Valshara's eyes kept drifting to Daniel. He could feel her gaze like a physical weight. The patterns on her skin changed colors when she looked at him, flashing from blue to purple to something close to red. He had no idea what those colors meant. After an hour, they took a break. Zathreen left the room first, as was their custom. As Velshara passed near Daniel, she paused for just a moment. Her eyes locked onto his. The patterns on her skin blazed bright yellow. Then she moved on, following her companions out of the room. "What was that about?" Kyle Murphy whispered to Daniel. Kyle was the team's engineer, a big man with a friendly face. "I have no idea," Daniel replied. Commander Grant turned to look at them. "Harper, did you do something to offend their leader?" "No, sir. I have not even spoken to her." "Well, she certainly noticed you. Keep your behavior professional. We cannot afford any mistakes here." The meeting resumed after 30 minutes. Again, Velshara stared at Daniel. This time, the other Zathreen seemed to notice. They exchanged glances with each other, their patterns flickering in what might have been confusion or concern. One of them leaned close to Velshara and whispered something. She responded without taking her eyes off Daniel. Daniel felt sweat forming on his forehead. This was supposed to be a simple first contact. Stand in the background, look professional, take notes. Instead, he had somehow become the focus of the alien leader's attention, and he had no idea why. By the end of the second day of meetings, Daniel was exhausted from the tension. Every time Velshara looked at him, which was often, he felt like he was being examined under a microscope. Her eyes seemed to look through him rather than at him, as if she was trying to see something hidden inside. The human team returned to their shuttle each night to sleep. On the third night, as Daniel lay in his small bunk, he wondered if this was some kind of Zathreen custom he had missed in the files. Maybe staring was how they showed respect. Or maybe it was an insult. He had no way to know. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself in the dark, "I am going to find out why she keeps staring at me." He did not know that the answer would change everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. 3 days of meetings had passed, and Daniel still had no answers. Velshara continued to stare at him during every session. The other Zathreen had stopped even pretending not to notice. Their glowing patterns flickered, nervously whenever their leader's attention drifted, to the human communications officer standing at the back of the room. Commander Grant had pulled Daniel aside after the morning session. "Whatever is happening, we need to address it. This staring is disrupting the negotiations. The Zathreen delegation seems uncomfortable with their own leader's behavior." "I understand, sir," Daniel said, "but I do not know what I did wrong. Neither do I just stay alert." That afternoon, Daniel found himself alone in one of the station's observation decks. He had come here to think and to review the cultural files on his portable device. The observation deck was a large room with a curved window that showed the stars outside. Inside, there were a few chairs and tables, all designed to fit multiple species. Daniel sat near the window, scrolling through information about Zathreen customs. He was searching for anything about staring or eye contact. Maybe there was some meaning he had missed. The door opened behind him with a soft hiss. Daniel looked up and felt his heart jump. Velshara stood in the doorway, alone. Her glowing patterns shifted from blue to green as she entered the room. She walked toward him with smooth, careful steps. Daniel stood up quickly, almost dropping his device. "Speaker Velshara, I did not expect to see you here." She stopped a few feet away from him. Once again, those large crystalline eyes fixed on him with that same intense stare. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Daniel felt his patience break. He had spent 3 days being stared at without understanding why. He was tired of the confusion and the tension. "Why do you keep staring at me?" The words came out more sharp than he intended, but he did not take them back. Velshara's patterns flashed through several colors very fast. Bright yellow, then purple, then red, then back to blue. Her head tilted to one side in a movement that looked wrong on something shaped almost like a human. "I am trying to understand why you exist." Daniel blinked. Of all the answers he had imagined, that was not one of them. "Why I exist? What does that mean?" Velshara moved closer. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Your species should not be possible, Daniel Harper. Your biology, your evolution, the way your kind developed. It contradicts every model we have built from studying 17,000 different worlds. She began to pace slowly in front of the window, her glowing patterns casting moving light across the floor. We have been watching humanity for many years. Since you first achieved faster-than-light travel, we have observed you from a distance. We expected you to follow the patterns. All species follow patterns. But humans do not. I do not understand, Daniel said. His mind was racing. What patterns? Velshara stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. Life develops according to rules. Strong species survive. Weak species die. Species that are well adapted to their environment thrive. Species that are not adapted disappear. This is how the universe works. This is how every intelligent species we know came to exist. Except yours. She raised one long-fingered hand and pointed at Daniel. Humans have no natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no thick skin, no armored shell. You are slow compared to many predators on your world. Your senses are weak. You cannot see in the dark as well as many creatures. You cannot hear high sounds or smell distant things. Yet somehow you became the apex predator of your entire planet. Daniel started to speak, but Velshara continued, her voice growing more intense. Your lifespans are short. Most intelligent species live for hundreds of years. You barely live 100 if you are lucky. Yet you build things that last for thousands of years. You plan for futures you will never see. You think in terms of generations beyond your own death. She took another step closer. Her patterns were shifting rapidly now, colors Daniel had not seen before. You are individually weak. A single human cannot do much. Yet you accomplish things that should require biological superiority. You work together in ways that should not be possible for a species that also fights itself constantly. You are walking contradictions. Daniel felt his initial confusion being replaced by something else. A strange kind of pride mixed with surprise. We are survivors, he said. That is what humans do. We adapt. Adapt? Velshara repeated the word like it was foreign. You use that word as if it is simple. Do you understand how impossible your adaptation is? My people, the Zathrene, we evolved on a stable world. Resources were abundant. The climate was consistent. Predators were few. We grew and developed according to logical patterns. When we faced problems, we solved them with time and careful thought. This is how intelligent life should develop. She gestured out at the stars. Every species in the galactic community has a similar story. They came from worlds that allowed them to grow. They had advantages that let them rise above other life forms. They followed the rules of evolution and biology. But humans? Your world tried to kill you at every opportunity. Daniel thought about Earth's history. The ice ages. The volcanic eruptions. The asteroid impacts. The diseases and predators and countless ways early humans could have died. We survived anyway, he said quietly. That is what terrifies us, Velshara said. Her voice had dropped lower. You should not have survived. By all statistical models, by every pattern we have observed across thousands of worlds, humanity should have remained a minor species confined to a small region. Or you should have gone extinct entirely. Instead, you spread across your entire world in mere thousands of years. Then you reached for the stars in your primitive ships, knowing that space could kill you, but going anyway. She moved to stand beside him at the window, both of them looking out at the darkness. I have been staring at you, Daniel Harper, because I am trying to understand what makes humans possible. What force drives your species to keep existing when the universe says you should not? What makes you refuse to accept the limits that every other species accepts? Daniel looked at her glowing profile. You said this terrifies you. Why would humans surviving terrify an advanced species like yours? Velshara was quiet for a long moment. Her patterns shifted to a deep blue, almost black. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because we have grown comfortable. The Zaythrine have not made a major scientific breakthrough in 3,000 years. Our society is stable. Our lives are long and peaceful. We have no challenges that force us to change. We are perfect according to our own measures. But we have also stopped growing. She turned to look at him again. We came to humanity not just for trade, Daniel Harper. We came because we are afraid. Afraid that our perfection has made us stagnant. We look at humans, at your chaos and your struggles and your impossible existence, and we wonder if we have lost something important. Something that you still have. Daniel felt the weight of what she was saying. You want to know how humans keep moving forward. Yes, you have no reason to succeed, yet you do. You face impossible odds, yet you overcome them. You should have accepted your limitations and died out quietly. Instead, you became one of the newest species to reach the stars, and you did it faster than almost anyone before you. We need to understand how. We need to understand what happens when a species refuses to quit. The room fell silent again. Daniel looked out at the stars, thinking about every human who had ever lived. Every person who had faced death and chosen to fight. Every generation that had built something better for the children they would never meet. Every time humanity had stared at the impossible and said, "Not today." I cannot speak for all humans, Daniel finally said. But I think the answer is simple. We do not know how to give up. We never learned that skill. So we just keep going even when we should not. Velshara's patterns shifted to gold. That is not a skill most species want. It leads to suffering and struggle. But perhaps, she said softly, it also leads to things we have forgotten how to reach. Over the next week, Daniel's assignment changed in a way he never expected. Velshara had formally requested permission from Commander Grant to conduct what she called behavioral observation studies. In practice, this meant she followed Daniel around the station and asked him endless questions about humanity. Commander Grant had been suspicious at first. This is highly irregular, Harper. We came here to negotiate trade agreements, not to serve as research subjects. But Velshara had made it clear that understanding humanity was now more important to the Zaythrine than any trade deal. The other Zaythrine delegates seemed uncomfortable with their leader's decision, but they did not argue. Whatever Velshara wanted. She got dot, so Daniel found himself walking through the corridors of Crossroads 7 with an alien woman who stared at him like he was the strangest thing in the universe. Which, according to her, he was. "Tell me about dogs," Velshara said as they sat in the station's dining area. She had brought her own food, something that looked like glowing paste in a silver container. Daniel was eating a sandwich that the station's food processors had made from the human supply stores. Dogs? Why do you want to know about dogs? I have been reading your historical files. Humans domesticated wolves. You took wild predators and turned them into companions. This should not be possible. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich and thought about how to explain it. Well, it happened a long time ago. Maybe 40,000 years ago. Early humans and wolves both hunted in groups. Some wolves probably started following human hunters to eat the leftovers from their kills. Over time, the wolves that were friendlier to humans survived better. Humans fed them, protected them. Eventually, they became dogs. Velshara's patterns flickered red. You are describing a complete reversal of predator-prey dynamics. Wolves should have seen humans as either competition or food. Instead, you formed a partnership with them. You changed their entire species over generations. This level of environmental manipulation should only be possible for a species with advanced technology, not primitive hunters with stone tools. We did not think of it as manipulation, Daniel said. We just liked having dogs around. They helped us hunt. They warned us about danger. They kept us company. Companionship with a predator species, Velshara said slowly. The Zaythrine have domesticated some animals, but only small, harmless creatures. We would never have thought to approach a predator and make it a friend. Over the following days, Velshara's questions ranged across all of human history. She was fascinated and disturbed by everything she learned. The concept of cooking troubled her deeply. They were standing in one of the station's shared kitchens while Daniel heated up some freeze-dried soup. "You are outsourcing digestion to fire," Velshara said, her patterns flashing purple. "You are using external energy to break down food before it enters your body. This is cheating evolution." "It is efficient," Daniel replied. "Cooking makes more nutrients available. It lets us eat a wider variety of foods. It probably helped our brains grow larger because we did not need as much energy for digestion." "Exactly my point. You found a way around biological limitations by using tools. Most species that develop intelligence do so because they have biological advantages first. You did it backwards. You use tools to create the conditions for intelligence, rather than using intelligence to create tools." Daniel poured the hot soup into a bowl. "Is that really so strange?" "It is unprecedented," Velshara said. "It suggests that humans do not wait for evolution to solve problems. You solve problems yourselves, then your biology catches up later. This is not how life works." Another day, they were in the station's small library, a room filled with data terminals that could access information from a dozen different species. Velshara had been reading about human wars. Her patterns had been dark red for the past hour. "Your species fights itself constantly," she said. "I have counted over 100 major conflicts in just the past 2,000 years of your recorded history. You create weapons designed to kill other humans. You form groups that hate other groups of humans. You have nearly destroyed yourselves multiple times." Daniel felt uncomfortable defending humanity's violent history. "We are not proud of our wars." "Yet you survived them," Velshara said. "That is what I do not understand. Most species that develop self-destructive tendencies either wipe themselves out or split into separate populations that evolve apart. But humans keep fighting and then keep cooperating. You form alliances with former enemies. You build peace after terrible wars. You remember the dead and then choose to keep living." She turned to look at him with those crystalline eyes. "The Zaitherine have never had a war. Not in 12,000 years of recorded history." We find the concept horrifying. Yet we also recognize that our peace came from having no major conflicts, not from choosing peace over war. You choose peace again and again, even after proving you are capable of terrible violence. That choice means something we cannot quite define. Daniel thought about Earth's history. World War I, World War II, the countless smaller conflicts. The nuclear weapons that could have ended everything. We learned from our mistakes, eventually. "Learning from mistakes requires surviving them first," Velshara said quietly. "Most species do not get that many chances." On the 5th day of their talks, Velshara brought up something that seemed to trouble her more than anything else. They were in the observation deck again, looking out at the stars. "Tell me about the Apollo program," she said. Daniel smiled despite himself. "You mean the moon landings?" "That was a long time ago. Back in the 1960s, we barely had computers. We built rockets using slide rules and determination." "I have seen the recordings," Velshara said. "I have reviewed the technical specifications of your spacecraft. They were primitive, dangerous. The astronauts had a significant chance of dying. Everyone knew this. Yet they went anyway. They were brave," Daniel said simply. "No," Velshara's patterns flashed bright white. "Bravery implies facing danger for a necessary purpose. Going to your moon was not necessary. It provided no immediate survival advantage. It was expensive and risky. Yet your species did it anyway, simply because you wanted to prove you could. You went to the moon, Daniel Harper, because it was there. That is not bravery. That is something else entirely. What would you call it?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Defiance. Humans defy the universe itself. You refuse to accept that anything is impossible. Even when your own limitations are obvious, even when the risks are clear, you try anyway. This is not logical behavior. This is not how successful species operate. But somehow for you, it works." Velshara moved to stand directly in front of the window. Her reflection merged with the stars beyond. "I told you the Zaithrine have stagnated. We have been stable for so long that we have forgotten how to change. We look at problems and calculate the optimal solution. If no optimal solution exists, we accept the problem as unsolvable. She turned back to Daniel. But humans do not accept unsolvable problems. You find ways around them. You try solutions that should not work. You refuse to quit even when quitting is the logical choice. And somehow, impossibly, you succeed often enough to keep going. You make us sound reckless, Daniel said. You are reckless, Velshara replied. But you are also still here, still growing, still reaching for new challenges. The Zathrene have everything we need, but we have lost the ability to want what we do not have. You have shown me that maybe survival is not enough. Maybe a species needs struggle to truly live. Daniel looked at the alien woman with her glowing patterns and strange eyes. A week ago, he had been annoyed by her staring. Now he understood that she had been trying to solve a puzzle. Humanity was the puzzle, and the answer scared her because it meant her own species had been wrong about what makes life meaningful. What will you do with this understanding? Daniel asked. Velshara's patterns shifted to gold. The color he had learned meant hope or determination. I will bring it back to my people. I will tell them that we need to learn from the species that should not exist. We need to remember that perfection is just another word for being finished growing. She looked back out at the stars. And perhaps we need to learn how to be a little more human, even if it means being a little more reckless too. The negotiations had been going well for nearly 2 weeks. Commander Grant and Velshara had reached preliminary agreements on several trade routes. The cultural exchange between Daniel and Velshara had given both species new perspectives. Everything seemed to be moving toward a successful conclusion. Then the alarms started. Blaring. Daniel was in his quarters on the Morning Star when the emergency alert sounded. He grabbed his communicator and ran toward the bridge. The corridors were filled with crew members moving quickly, but not panicking. Humans were good at staying calm in emergencies. They had lots of practice. Commander Grant was already on the bridge, studying the displays with Kyle Murphy and Amy Rodriguez. What is happening? Daniel asked. Solar flare, Kyle said grimly. A big one. The station's sensors picked it up about 10 minutes ago. It is going to hit Crossroads 7 in less than 3 hours. Daniel felt his stomach drop. How bad? Bad enough that the radiation will fry anyone not behind proper shielding, Amy said. She was the team's pilot, a small woman with quick hands and a quicker mind. The station's shields were built to handle normal radiation levels, not a flare this size. Commander Grant turned to face them. The station's automated systems are already failing. The shielding is at 60% capacity and dropping. We need to evacuate everyone. How many beings are on the station? Daniel asked. Kyle checked his display. About 400. Humans, Zathrene, and delegates from 6 other species. The problem is, we do not have enough ships to evacuate everyone in time. Even if we use every shuttle and pod, we can maybe save 300. The bridge fell silent. That left 100 beings who would not make it. An hour later, the emergency meeting was held in the main conference room. Every delegation leader was present. The station's automated voice had explained the situation in multiple languages. Now they had to decide what to do. The senior Zathrene delegate, a male named Korthvin, stood to speak. His patterns were a deep blue, the color of serious thought. We must establish priority protocols. We should calculate who has the highest survival probability and social value. We save those individuals first. Several other alien delegates nodded in agreement. This was the logical approach. Save those who could be saved according to their importance. Commander Grant stood up. No, we are not leaving anyone behind. Korthvin's patterns flickered with confusion. Commander Grant, the mathematics are clear. We cannot save everyone. We must optimize for the greatest survival outcome. Then we change the outcome, Grant said firmly. We find a way to save everyone. That is impossible, another alien delegate said, a floating creature whose name Daniel could not pronounce. The shielding is failing. The ships are insufficient. Accept the reality. Daniel watched Velshara during this exchange. She had been quiet, her patterns shifting between colors rapidly. She was learning again, he realized. Watching how humans responded to impossible situations, Commander Grant turned to Kyle. Can we repair the shields? Not in 3 hours. They are too far gone. Can we boost them temporarily? Kyle frowned, thinking hard. Maybe if we had more power generators. But the station does not have any extras. What about the shuttles? Amy suggested. Each shuttle has its own power system. Could we connect them to the station's shield grid? Kyle's eyes widened. That is insane. The power systems are completely different. The connectors are not compatible. We would have to rebuild the interface from scratch. Can it be done? Grant asked. I do not know. Maybe if we had time and the right equipment and a lot of luck. Grant smiled. Then let us get started. Murphy, you take the engineering team. Rodriguez, coordinate with the other ship pilots. Get every shuttle docked and ready. Harper, work with the Zathrin. We need their technical knowledge. The meeting broke apart as people rushed to their tasks. Daniel found Velshara in the crowd. We need your help, he said. She looked at him with those crystalline eyes. You are attempting the impossible again. That seems to be what we do best. Her patterns shifted to gold. Then let us see if we can learn how. The next 2 hours were chaos. Kyle and his engineering team tore apart access panels and rebuilt power connections using whatever materials they could find. Amy and the other pilots positioned shuttles at key points around the station. Creating a network of temporary power sources, the Zathrin engineers joined the effort, though they kept questioning the approach. This should not work, one of them told Kyle. The power flow is unstable. The connections are makeshift. The whole system could overload. Then we better make sure it does not, Kyle said, not looking up from his work. Meanwhile, Chris Bennett, the human medical officer, was coordinating with alien medical staff across the station. Different species had different radiation tolerances. They needed to know who needed the most protection and how to treat radiation exposure for creatures they had never studied before. Language barriers made everything harder. Technical terms did not always translate well. But humans kept pushing forward, using hand gestures and drawings when words failed. They worked with aliens they had met only days ago as if they had been partners for years. Daniel found himself running between different teams, carrying messages and equipment. He saw Velshara working alongside Kyle, her long fingers manipulating tools with surprising skill. She was learning human engineering through pure immersion. Adapting on the fly, with 30 minutes left before the solar flare hit, Kyle called everyone to the command center. We have connected 8 shuttles to the shield grid. It is not pretty and I would not bet my life on it, but it is all we have. Will it work? Commander Grant asked. Kyle hesitated. It should boost the shields to about 85% capacity. That is not enough. The room fell silent. They had worked so hard, but the math still did not add up. Then Amy spoke up. What if we angle the shields? Focus all the protection on the side facing the sun. Leave the backside exposed. That would leave half the station vulnerable, Korthvin said. But the flare is directional, Amy continued. It comes from one side. We do not need equal protection all around. We just need maximum protection where the radiation will hit hardest. Kyle started calculating on his display. His face lit up. That could work. We would be redirecting all power to one hemisphere of the station. It is inefficient by normal standards, but for a short-term emergency event, it might give us the coverage we need. How long will we need to hold the shields? Grant asked. The flare will pass in about 20 minutes. If we can keep the shields up that long, everyone should survive. Grant looked around the room. Then let us do it. Everyone to their positions. Pilots, be ready to disconnect your shuttles immediately if the power feedback gets too high. We do not need heroes dying to save the system. Daniel took his position at a monitoring station. Velshara stood beside him, watching the displays. You are risking your ships? She said quietly. If the power overload happens, those shuttles could be destroyed. Your people could be stranded here. Then we better make sure the overload does not happen, Daniel said. The solar flare hit like a hammer. The station shook. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. On the displays, Daniel could see radiation levels spiking to lethal levels outside the shields. Inside the command center, Kyle was shouting instructions to his team. Amy was coordinating with the shuttle pilots, adjusting power flows in real time. The whole station hummed with energy being pushed through systems. Never designed for this kind of load, a power conduit exploded on Deck 4. Human and alien engineers rushed to contain it. Another conduit failed on Deck 7. The team rerouted power through backup systems that were already straining. 15 minutes passed. The shields held at 89%. Not perfect, but enough. The radiation levels inside the station remained safe. Then one of the shuttles reported a critical overload. The pilot, a human woman named Katie Walsh, called in. The power coupling is melting. I need to disconnect or the shuttle will explode. Negative, Kyle said. If you disconnect now, we lose shield coverage on Section 12. There are 60 people in that section. If I do not disconnect, the explosion could damage the station's power grid. We could lose everything. Daniel could hear the fear in her voice. She knew what she had to do, but she did not want to die doing it. Hold position, Commander Grant said firmly. Murphy, can you stabilize that coupling remotely? I am trying, Kyle said, his fingers flying across controls. But I need more time. I do not have more time, Katie said. The panic was clear now. Daniel watched the timer. 5 minutes left until the flare passed. Just 5 more minutes. Velshara suddenly moved to a control panel. Her fingers danced across the alien interface. I am redirecting power from non-essential systems in Section 8. It should reduce the load on that shuttle by 15%. Kyle looked at her in surprise. That might work. Walsh, hold for 30 more seconds. The seconds dragged by like hours. Daniel could hear Katie breathing hard over the communication channel. Then Kyle shouted, Got it. The coupling is stabilized. Walsh, you are clear. Thank God, Katie whispered. 5 minutes later, the solar flare passed. The radiation levels dropped back to normal. The shields had held. Every single being on Crossroads 7 had survived. In the command center, people collapsed into chairs. The day after the solar flare, the station was still recovering. Repair crews worked around the clock to fix damaged systems. The shuttles were being checked for stress damage from the power overload. Everyone moved more slowly, exhausted from the crisis, but the negotiations took an unexpected turn. Velshara called for a private meeting with Commander Grant. When Grant emerged 2 hours later, she looked surprised and thoughtful. They do not want a simple trade agreement anymore, Grant told her team in the briefing room. Velshara wants to establish a cultural exchange program. They want to send Zathrene students to learn from us. They want to study how humans think and work. Kyle whistled low. That is a big change from mapping trade routes. They saw what we did yesterday, Amy said. They saw humans turn an impossible situation into a survival story. That impressed them. More than impressed them, Grant corrected. It scared them. Velshara admitted that the Zathrene have been coasting on their past achievements for thousands of years. They want to understand how to start growing again, and they think humans can teach them. Daniel felt strange about that. Less than 3 weeks ago, humanity had been the newcomer to galactic politics. Now, an ancient advanced species was asking to learn from them. 2 days later, the negotiations officially concluded. The agreements were signed in a ceremony that included representatives from multiple species. Trade routes were established, technology exchanges were planned, and a new program was created that would send Zathrene youth to Earth and human volunteers to Zathrene worlds. After the ceremony, Velshara asked to speak with Daniel one final time. They met in the observation deck, the same place where they had first talked privately. It felt appropriate to end where they had begun. I must apologize again, Valshara said as they stood by the window. My staring was rude by your cultural standards. In my culture we study what we do not understand, and I have never encountered anything I understood less than humans. Daniel laughed. I was pretty confused for a while there. Her pattern shifted to a warm gold color. When I first saw you in that meeting room, I saw something that should not exist. A member of a species that defies every rule we thought we knew about life and intelligence. I could not look away because you represented a puzzle I needed to solve. Did you solve it? Daniel asked. Valshara was quiet for a moment. I learned that some puzzles do not have clean solutions. Humans exist because you refuse to accept the universe's verdict. You were supposed to die out, but you did not. You were supposed to stay weak, but you became strong. You were supposed to accept your limitations, but you keep breaking through them instead. She turned to face him fully. Your species terrifies the galactic community, Daniel Harper. Not because you are aggressive, though you can be. Not because you are expansionist, though you are that too. You terrify us because you are unpredictable. Every other species follows patterns. We can predict what they will do based on their biology and history. But humans? You do things that make no sense and somehow make them work. Daniel thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks. The conversations about human history, the desperate fight to save everyone on the station, the way humans had worked with aliens they barely knew to achieve something impossible. We just do what we think is right, he said, even if it does not make sense. That is exactly what terrifies us, Valshara replied. You operate on moral principles rather than logical calculations. You make decisions based on what should be rather than what is. This is not how successful species are supposed to function. But you do it anyway, and you survive. She moved closer to the window, her reflection mixing with the stars beyond. The Zaythrine have everything we need for comfortable lives. Our technology is advanced. Our society is stable. We have eliminated most sources of conflict and struggle. By every measure, we have achieved the goal that all species should seek. But, Daniel prompted, but we have also stopped growing. We have had no major scientific breakthroughs in 3,000 years. Our art has become repetitive. Our philosophy goes in circles. We are comfortable, but we are dying slowly. Not physically, but as a culture. As a people with purpose. Her pattern shifted to deep blue. When I watch humans, I see a species that should have died countless times but kept choosing to live. You face impossible odds and refuse to quit. You encounter problems with no good solutions and create new solutions anyway. You are willing to risk everything for people you barely know because you believe it is the right thing to do. Valshara turned back to Daniel. Yesterday, when that solar flare came, my people calculated the optimal survival strategy. We determined who could be saved and accepted that others would die. That is logical. That is efficient. But Commander Grant refused. She said you would find a way to save everyone, and you did. You turned an impossible situation into a survivable one through sheer determination and creativity. We got lucky, Daniel said. If even one more thing had gone wrong, people would have died. But you tried, Valshara said intensely. That is what matters. You refused to accept that some must die. You risked your shuttles, your people, your safety to save beings from species you met only weeks ago. The Zaythrine would never have done that. We would have calculated, optimized, and accepted the losses. You changed the equation instead. Daniel looked at the alien woman who had spent 2 weeks trying to understand humanity. What will you tell your people when you go home? Valshara's patterns cycled through several colors before settling on gold. I will tell them that we have been wrong about what makes a species successful. We thought survival was about being perfectly adapted to your environment, about eliminating risk and struggle, about following the logical path. But humans have shown me that maybe survival is not enough. Maybe a species needs struggle to truly live. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I will tell them about a species that climbed from the caves to the stars in mere thousands of years. A species that domesticated predators, conquered their own world, and reached for other planets even when it seemed impossible. A species that faces extinction-level problems by refusing to accept extinction. You make us sound heroic, Daniel said. We are just people trying to survive. That is heroism, Velshara replied. True heroism is not about grand gestures. It is about ordinary beings choosing to keep going when giving up would be easier. It is about building futures you will never see. It is about saving strangers because it is right, not because it is profitable. Your species does this naturally without thinking about it. That is what makes you special. Daniel felt uncomfortable with the praise. We make plenty of mistakes. We fight each other. We damage our own planet. We are far from perfect. No species is perfect, Velshara said. Zatharine learned that lesson too late. We tried to eliminate all our flaws, all our struggles. We succeeded, and in doing so, we eliminated the forces that drove us to grow. You humans keep your struggles. You accept that you are flawed. But you keep trying to be better anyway. That balance between accepting your limitations and refusing to be limited by them, that is the key we lost. She looked out at the stars one last time. I came here expecting to negotiate a simple trade agreement. Instead, I found a species that challenges everything my people believe about life and progress. You have given the Zatharine a gift more valuable than any technology or resource. You have given us hope that we can change, that we can grow again, that perfection is not the end, but the enemy of progress. Daniel joined her at the window. Out there, beyond the station, were billions of stars. Around some of those stars were worlds where life had developed. Some of that life had achieved intelligence, built civilizations, reached for space. Each species had taken a different path, but somehow humans had taken a path that seemed impossible to everyone else. What happens now? Daniel asked. Velshara's patterns glowed bright gold. Now we learn. We send our youth to Earth to see how humans think, how you work, how you keep moving forward despite all logic saying you should fail. We study your chaos and your creativity, and maybe we remember how to be uncomfortable again, how to take risks, how to refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. She turned to look at him one last time. Thank you, Daniel Harper. You answered my question about why you exist. You exist because you refuse not to. That is the simplest and most powerful truth in the galaxy. The next day, the delegations began departing Crossroads 7. The Zatharine ships left first, sleek and beautiful, heading back toward their home systems. The Morning Star prepared to return to Earth with news of successful first contact and agreements that would change humanity's place in the galaxy. As Daniel stood on the bridge, watching the station fade into the distance, Commander Grant came to stand beside him. Velshara told me what you two discussed, about how we terrify the galaxy. Yes, sir. How do you feel about that? Daniel thought about it. Scared, mostly. It is a big responsibility, being the species that does not follow the rules.